Hi, my name's Tom and welcome to the second episode in my dedicated series on fourths tuning for the guitar, that's EADGCF. In the first episode of this series I talked about open chords for the guitar and how I mentioned in my very first introduction video to this tuning that I originally thought they were impossible, and that's actually untrue. They're very much possible, and in fact we can get some open chords that we can't in standard, like for example our F open chord, which sounds great. I also talked about what this series is going to be doing, and the first few videos are going to be talking about things that us guitar players learn very early on and that just get integrated into our playing without much thought. Things like open chords, bar chords, and the pentatonic shapes, which are what's going to be the topics of the first few videos, and talking about how what we can do to these things to make them playable and just as comfortable in this new tuning. So in the first video we looked at open chords. In this video we're going to be talking about bar chords. In specifics I'm going to be talking about how we're going to get around these 6-string bars that we can't play anymore, because these 6-string bars and the 5-string bars are the really only bar chords that anyone ever used, apart from the sort of 7th chords and extended chords and jazz chords, which I'll be talking about in depth in a video at a later date. So to go back to what I talked about in the very first video I made on this tuning, when I mentioned an interview with Alex Hutchings, who is a fantastic fourths player based in the UK. He talks about how when he switched to this tuning he realised he couldn't do these big 6-string bars anymore because they sound like that, and to move our fingers around to play that is incredibly uncomfortable. He talks about when he realised how inefficient these chords were anyway, which is something that I'd come to terms with before I even switched to this tuning. If you think about it theoretically and technically, a major chord is just 3 notes. It's the root, the major third, and then the 5th on top of that, and that's what gives us the major chord sound. Now if we look at the guitar and look about what notes we were actually playing, I'm going to be talking about this in A for now. We were playing 6 notes, and it's a 3-note chord, so there's already some duplication going on there, but when we really look at it we'll notice how severe that is. So we've got the root note, then we would have had the 5th, then the root again, then the 3rd, be it major or minor, but in this case major, then we would have had the 5th, and then the root again. So we had that root there 3 times, and the 5th there twice, and the 3rd, the defining note in the chord, was only present once. So the way he talks about it is especially when you're playing in a band, you really need to think about what chord voicings you're playing. If you're playing in like a jazz group or a funk group, you don't want to be getting in the way of the keyboard player or bass player playing that low end stuff. So what you might want to do is just play the basic triad itself. So on the top 3 strings I'm playing 4th fret on the F, 4th fret on the C, and 6th fret on the G, which gives us our A major triad, which we could play and not get in the way of any other members of the band. But if we did want this big sound, there's 2 ways we can go about doing it. The first way I tried to do is to just take this as the starting point and adjust our playing so we can accommodate the notes in the new tuning. Now what I had to do, and the thing I came up with, is that we had to drop the root on the low E, so we wouldn't play that anymore, and we'd play the 4th fret on the C and 4th fret on the F alongside the rest of the chord, which would sound like this. So this looks a little bit awkward, but it's actually really comfortable to play when you get used to it, and it requires a little bit of a stretch, but in a way that's a good thing because it forces our fingers to stretch out of that comfort zone a bit, and it gives them a bit of a workout. So instead of playing our full 6-string bar like this, we play a 5-string bar, dropping the root like this. Now I sum up all chord voicings in 3 different ways. It's either diagonal towards the headstock, towards the bridge, or straight down. And what I mean by that is it depends which finger is playing the lowest note in the chord. In this case, one of these 2 fingers would be. So all the rest of the fingers are going to fall this way, obviously because we can't play like that, towards the headstock. And the way we used to play bar chords like this our first finger's playing the root note and the rest of the fingers are falling towards the bridge. This is what I'm talking about when I talk about these things as in diagonally towards the bridge or to the headstock. And then notes, chords where we're using our middle finger to do the root, they will be straight down because we've got fingers falling either side of that note. So this is one way to do it with our fingers falling towards the headstock, which is going to sound as close to these original bar chord as possible. And again, this is totally movable, and we're just talking about major for the time being. And we can move it onto the next string set, or even the low string set if we miss out the top two strings. Because it's the beauty of this tuning, we can move things around. Now, I originally just started using that, but I found it a little bit clumsy and a little bit awkward because I like to use my first finger as the lowest note in the chord wherever possible. It feels more natural, it feels more what I'm used to, and just generally more comfortable on the neck. So what I did, I had to think about it, and I realised that I couldn't get away with just playing this for a bar chord because, again, we can't play these extra notes without twisting our hand in a ridiculous position. So we're missing out on a lot of harmonic information at the top, which I didn't want to do. I didn't want to have to miss out on that. So what I realised was, and these are the many realisations you'll hopefully get in your playing when you switch to this tuning, or if you switch to this tuning, is that we can just repeat this exact shape one octave higher. And suddenly we've got our first finger doing the root and the harmonic information still on the top two strings, so we've still got that range. In fact, the third, the gender of the chord, is right at the top, so arguably the most important note in the chord is right at the top there in the highest voicing, which is fantastic. So what we can do now, instead of trying to add, like we were doing here, trying to add notes on top of that, we can add notes below it. So moving this shape up here, I've got so this is still an A, I've got 7th fret on the D, 9th on the G and C, and then 8th on the F. We can add notes below it now, and in this case there's really only one note we can add, and that's the 5th, which will be located at the 7th fret on the A string, and for that we just need to flatten our finger out, and we just play the note below the root. So in this case, instead of thinking of the root on the E string and going, okay, so here's the 5th and there's another root, so we play like this, it's much quicker to learn the names of the notes on the D string and just have that as your home for thinking of where the notes lie, basically. Now, when we move to minor, all we need to do is lower this note 1 fret, and then if we wanted to move to dominant, we go back to our major and we just lift off our little finger. So this is how I've managed to get around playing bar chords on the guitar. Whenever I want to play them, instead of doing it on the string sets like this, so the E string root and the A string root, I just think of all the roots being on the D string and move my hands around like that. And if I need to move, then I can just move this shape down and avoid hitting that F string like I did there. And that takes a lot of practice to get. So I'm hitting all 6 strings, but I'm muting the lowest and highest string. So that can be a little bit tricky. Now what we can do when we play the minor is we can actually add in an extra note. Excuse me, we can add that minor 3rd in the bass, which is a really interesting voicing, which would have been really difficult in the last tuning. Now I've only talked about I've only really given you solutions for the 2 bar chord chips that we used on the low E string and A string. But that should be enough information for you to have a go with on your own and practice with. So basically, when you think about it, when we've got one of these shapes, we just move the low 4 strings to the top 4 strings and add some more notes below to fill in that gap, rather than trying to fill in the gap at the top by moving our fingers around. I'm not going to talk about dominant 7 chords in this lesson. I'm going to talk about that in another video, that I'm going to talk about extended chords and quote-unquote jazz chords, so like ninths and all those which I actually think work better in this tuning than standard when you get used to it. So look forward to that. But hopefully this should give you enough information to work out some of your own examples. This is the beauty of this tuning. Hopefully in these lessons I've given you some starting off points, so you don't feel completely lost in the new tuning. And the thing I get every time I pick up the guitar in this new tuning is I find out new ways to do things, and it's almost like doors unlock in my head. You hear about people practicing on the guitar and they reach a plateau and then they struggle and struggle and struggle, and then they get to another plateau and struggle and struggle and struggle. Well, in this new tuning, it's opened more doors in the sort of 2-3 months that I've been in this tuning than I had in my last sort of 3 years of playing on the guitar. So it really has been that beneficial. And it's just all we're doing, and I said this in the video before, whenever we're playing a lick, a scale, a chord, whenever we would play anything on these top 2 notes, we just move it down 1 fret, and that's 1 fret towards the headstock. That's all we need to do, and it's that simple. But the fact that the guitar is now laid out in a much more logical way, it makes life a lot easier. So hopefully you've enjoyed this video. If you have, then please rate and subscribe. I've got a new video coming soon on the pentatonic scale for this tuning, and lots more content specific for 4th tuning. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you soon.